Dream big. I can't remember who said that to me the first time, or maybe it was something I saw in the movie, I heard in the passing, but it just made complete sense to me. Well, actually, I couldn't understand how anybody could dream anything but big. The greater the dream, the greater the life. Only thing was, I never quite realized what was a big dream and what was completely unrealistic. And maybe those close to me would argue that's still the case. I was only 12 years old when I started looking for jobs for the first time, because my aunt in Hollywood, she used to send me these signed pictures of Tom Cruise, Winona Ryder, the gang from Beverly Hills 90210, and of course I knew this is my destiny. Job ads back then, they were in the newspapers, so every day I would search through the papers, and I'm sure this will be a big shock to you all, but there were never any lead roles against Leonardo DiCaprio there. Still, I kept searching, and what actually landed me my dream job years later was pure luck and perfect timing. It wasn't against Leonardo DiCaprio, but it was one of the leads on what became Norway's greatest TV success, Hotel Caesar. And this was such an amazing time of my life because I fell completely in love with storytelling and the way you could actually share emotions. I was able to build a career that I was extremely proud of, both in front of and behind the camera, and the industry was booming. In Norway, we went from having a public broadcaster telling us what to watch and where and when, to streaming live HD on our mobile phones. There were opportunities absolutely everywhere. But then I started noticing something, because I would see these extremely talented freelancers go from prestigious global film projects to then being unemployed for the rest of the year. And I would see major production houses struggling to access good and verified talent on short notice. And this was just absurd to me. We'd never produced, consumed, or needed more content than we did then. But still, the ways of finding these opportunities and finding the talents were pretty much the same as when I was 12. You were dependent on insufficient job ads and a dose of pure luck. So of course I had to fix this. Because I could see that there was a solution. I had an idea of how we could just use new technology to create a marketplace for this purpose. What I, of course, did not take into consideration was that I knew absolutely nothing about tech. So, in fact, I barely knew how to reboot my computer, but, I thought, I know people who know. So I called my friend. She was a graphic designer. I called her up and I said, we're going to change the world. Somewhat confused, she said, I don't think you understand what my job is, but do you have UI? Do you have UX for this platform? And I said, Well, I was Googling, what is UI? What is UX? I knew nothing. I had to learn how to write technical specs and draw wireframes. I had to write business plans. I had to hire a team with no money and try to get finances without a team. Yeah, I literally had none of the experiences or skill sets needed. And it was probably crazy, but still the timing was right. And any skill set can be taught or it can be gathered, but a problem does need a solution. So we launched Time to Riot in 2016, and in a few years we had more than 55,000 members using our platform, showcasing the work they've done, their professional network, and people in the creative industries were actually getting jobs on our site. But at the same time, the world was actually moving in a direction where all industries were becoming more similar to what I grew up with in the creative industries. Project-based work, remote workers, companies needing new tools to nourish their networks and their communities, events needing to create value between the various events, access management needing to be linked to identities using these platforms, and then looking at what we had already created and all the stuff that we'd learned from our process, it became clear that now we could deliver our platform as a service to other companies, and suddenly we were on a complete crazy scale. The timing for community networking solutions as a platform was perfect. So for us, it's been time to scale, and the corporate partnerships is what made that happen. And it just so happens that this is the subject for the day. how to scale through partnerships. What does it mean to scale? How can we make sure that partnerships between startups and corporates can create value for everyone involved? Danske Bank and Sopra Steria have initiated this event, as well as the 3-part podcast series, to explore the do's and don'ts and then prepare us all for scale. Danske Bank has the first guest out of the day, so please welcome Venture Director at DNV GL, Kåre Helle.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. I thought my role now is to try and initiate some thoughts and share some of the experiences that we've had, and I personally have had, in the large corporation that we are. DNV GL is a big and old traditional Norwegian corporation, which is global reach and lots of good stuff about us. We won't indulge in that. I worked in this company for most of my professional career, so I have no experience in what it means to start a new company from scratch. But I have tried to start a few companies or a few initiatives internally. So all of them has failed. And I think all of them has failed, and some of them more dramatically than others. And I think that's what I've learned a little bit about innovation and startup scene, is that I've learned the experience, or I had the experience of leaving a customer meeting with the belief that leaving a customer meeting with the experience of coming out of that meeting and the market, the total addressable market that I thought suddenly was 5% of what I thought it going into that meeting. And I reflected on that at that time, saying, these discussions that we had now, I could have had a year before. There was no showing of prototypes, there was no showing of functionality, there was no showing of any tech. It was about exploring the potential for the idea that I had. In the middle of that, I think after that, I had to go back to my corporate family and tell them that, you remember all of these millions that you gave me a year ago? I think we wasted them all. This is it's extremely learningful experience, and I think that's something that I'm trying to take forward. I naturally, or gladly, I also have some successes in my past. So on this slide, the success is the big blast on the left, and the failure is the guy on the right. So I'm not going to dive into the success story. That's a different topic, but it's also something that I'm passionate about. So if somebody are more curious to what the explosion is, I'm more than happy to share those thoughts as well. But so these learnful experiences, and after I helped and I started forming some of our digital strategy in DNV GL 6 years ago, and we looked at this scene and the digital revolution and all of these, the fourth industrial revolution, all of these things, that then we recognized that this is going extremely fast, and we think it's going extremely fast. And we set out a strategy to how we should try and reinvent and re-engineer and basically disrupt DNV GL's own initiatives to find new value. I think and after that period, I've significantly underestimated how difficult it is, whether you're a startup or you're a corporate, to really find new customer value and deliver on it. It's extremely difficult. But we set out with good help from lots of good books that everybody should read on how to do innovation, how to do innovation portfolio, how to build a good pipeline of ideas, and created this process. And this process is implemented in the company today. And you can recognize this from a typical venture journey, where you start kind of angel investor, you move up to pre-seed, you go into seed, and you move into scale and Series A and B. It's the same kind of internal story that we want to do. And a venture capitalist, they know that they have to have a lot of seeds in the beginning in order to find a success in the end. So to me, innovation is very much a numbers game. It's about finding lots of seeds and then nurturing as they pass through. So this is what it looks like in principle. The this is what it feels like when I look at my own company and what we do. And if you can think of the bottom of the slide of this, is our existing core services. That's what we are brilliant in innovating around. We innovate around our core services, so we do that particularly well. That's why the organization is 156 years old, and we are quite successful in what we do. I think it's very difficult for us to ask our existing staff and our existing core services to come up with the next revolutionary idea that will disrupt or really propel new customer value for our customers. So I think we are skewed internally of our company on how we find and source new ideas. So for me, the engagement with the startup scene, which I started a few years back, and which also moved into the current role that I have, is about this phenomenon. I want to expose the company with more new ideas, more creativity. And we have to, so there's 12,000 employees in DNV GL, all of them highly educated, all of them very talented. There's 6 billion people in the world. So this is simply, if you look at it simply from statistics, where do we think the next good idea that is relevant for us comes from? Does it come from exclusively those 12,000, or do they come from externally? So in order to kind of, if you notice this slide, now just the one topic, you can see that we start with a few ideas, but we are actually quite good with taking them all the way through. And this is what I did that time when I came out of that customer meeting in Aberdeen. And I had an idea that I believed in. And then I'm pretty good at sales, also internally. So I managed to convince the CEOs of the company, so give me lots of millions of money, I'll make this idea great. This is much easier, I tell you, than to convince a venture capitalist. I have a lot of internal kind of, internal capital. I've done good things before. Kåre is a good guy. I believe in him. Let's give him a couple of millions. So we are quite good at doing this by just convincing our management and top management. And I hope nobody of them are listening right now, but I have to say most of our top management is not good at spotting the next good idea. Neither am I. So we can't rely on the existing experience that we have, because the existing experience I have is with traditional core services. So what we do then, we have to go out and expose ourselves to different other environment. But I created the perfect service. It was working technically very well. It created fantastic technical results. But the market wasn't there. So that's the failure that we did. So I think there's one slide of this that big corporates has a huge muscle and are very good at. There's one side of this slide which I think we are too weak in doing. And this is, I think, the startup scene. And then I think this is different to the individual startups. I don't think the individual startups in itself necessarily are that good either. There's lots of them, lots of founders out in the world who thinks this idea is brilliant. I just have to convince the world that the idea is brilliant. And to do that, I need to build the shit and then show it to the world, and then everybody would understand. So that is, I think, it's a little bit the founder's challenge, is that we need to really test these ideas and whether they actually bring customer value. But my privilege as a now venture capitalist, I can stand on top of the whole startup scene, and I can look at all of them, and I can pick, and I can work with those I believe, and those I see that actually has traction. So if you look at it on the totality of the ecosystem, of whether it's Norwegian or European, or whether the totality of the startup scene, they are experimenting extremely fast as a community in total. Not all of them are fast individually, but as a total, for us to tap into all of that creativity, extremely valuable, in my opinion. And I can then, hopefully, when we engage them, we can also coach and learn from them on how they work. And for me, startup engagement is not about learning agile development. Come on, guys, we can do that ourselves. We have all of those books at home. That's not the point. We need to build on statistics and the numbers game. It's a numbers game. Innovation is a numbers game. When we find something that we think is really valuable, then I believe in the extreme powers of partnerships. Because one, big corporates has, as I said, I can convince a few CEOs in the company and they will give me a few millions and we will execute. And we will execute almost to brilliance. And too perfect sometimes, but we have that capability. So we have a lot of existing capacity in the company, in our customer base, that we can exploit together with a potential startup. So on the left side, we need a lot of help from the startup community as corporates. And on the right side of this slide, then this is where I think corporates can excel. And I hope that we can avoid this a little bit this stereotype of David versus Goliath type of thinking. I don't think sometimes these startups should disrupt the big, and I think that's how it will be. But I think also finding a partnership where we can scale and help both sides of this is where we can find some magic together. So just I thought I'll exemplify with one superpower that I think we have. This is Space PT. They were on 100 pitches yesterday. Pretty cool startup that uses satellite imagery to look at whether or not there is forest growing into the power lines of the world. So power lines, one of their threats is that there's trees growing into it, causes fire. Big forest fires in California a couple of years ago was caused by this problem. So a very simple solution that you can look at use artificial intelligence to look for when there's these, and you see it on the bottom picture, when there's these trees start to grow into the power lines and get dangerous to that, or starts to exposing that risk. It's a Swedish startup. I haven't talked to them, so I just saw them yesterday, and I like the case that they have. And there's a few others on this space. They're not alone on it. But if we are able to couple that capability with our existing install base, so DNV GL owns we develop a software and sell a software called Synergy Electric, which is, by the way, the tool that most of these power lines in the States use to manage their assets. So it's the integrity management system. They remember how often they should paint the towers or whatever they do in that space. But we have existing customers on a software as a service platform where we could expose this type of customer value. So that's some of the superpowers that we have. We also naturally, because we've made this tool, we also have a bit of credibility in that space that sometimes the startups don't lack. I don't think that's that important. I think it's important that these customers we can start experimenting with if we found a good way of sharing that value and that value together. And through that, we could potentially scale this small initiative much faster than if they were to say, the traditional, now we captured, this is Swedish guys, so they're probably going to catch the home market in Sweden first, move out of Europe, and then let's think about the States, which is a massive market for these people, for this company. This is places where we have assets, we have presence, we have people, and most importantly, we have installed software on their machines already. That's a pretty good way of scaling in my book. And it's the good, if then DNV GL is able to allow this to happen on top of our existing install base, I think we can find some magic. Finding these cases is extremely difficult. Finding them, and that's my job today. I'm trying to find them and figure where does these two kind of needs align and where we can find together. But I think if we can find them, when we find them, I think it could be extremely powerful and extremely valuable for both parties. So that's my initial thoughts for today. Oh.
Thank you, Kåre. So Kåre's readiness is based on both then fuck-ups and experience. And Sopra Steria has been working on something quite specific in order to deal with the corporate readiness. To tell you more about this, please welcome Head of Sopra Steria Scale Up, Tobias Studer Andersen, on stage.
Thank you, Kimberly. It's a pleasure to be here. I am Tobias, and as Kimberly said, I'm since 2 years ago heading the scale-up initiative that we run in Sopra Steria. Today, I'm going to talk about corporate readiness to actually work with startups, and a little bit later you're going to meet Gustav from Storebrand, who's going to share some really valuable experiences on how they work with startups and partnerships. Cool. Time to scale, we're talking about that. And in order to scale through partnerships, we always talk, or almost often talk, about the startup's readiness to work with the large corporates, and both public and private. But we hardly talk about what should big companies do in order to actually get something valuable out of the startup partnerships and the partnerships. Because the rig that need to be in-house to get most of the partnerships doesn't come by itself. It's a quite big change from what we are doing today in the large corporates. So this is something that I would like to address today. First, some short about the Scale-Up initiative. 2 years ago, we launched Sopra Steria Scale-Up, a global initiative which has a role to be the bridge builder between the large corporates and the startups. We saw there was a space here to do the connections, and not only do the connections, but also taking an active part in to actually get something done when you're talking about these partnerships. Because throwing in a startup in a large corporate, it's quite big fail rate in that. You need to kind of balance the power, you need to get two different worlds to talk to each other, and you also need two different worlds to collaborate in a constructive way. So what we are doing with Scale-Up is not about investing, it's about what Kåre said, finding those good solutions that could add value to our clients. Because traditionally the consultancy business has been based on either you develop things by yourself or you buy stuff from the large global providers. But we see in the startup world, there are so many new innovative solutions that could add value to the large corporates. And that's what we want to do. Help the large corporates to get access to the startup ecosystem, where our job is to facilitate the process in working together, as well as identify and quality assurance the right solutions that could fit and solve problems for the large clients we have. But in order to that, during these 2 years, one of the biggest learnings are that we see that the startups, some of them are quite ready and good to go, but there is a gap from the corporate side. So what we find out that, okay, we need to do something about that. How can we learn? How can we help the large corporates to do better in their partnerships with the startups? So what we did was to develop a kind of a framework called the Startup Readiness Assessment, which is based on these different categories you see here. Because if you're going to collaborate and have a good partnership with a startup, we see there are a couple of things you need to think about regarding management and culture. A couple of things you need to focus on: strategy and partnerships, and also structure and process, and as well technology. How can the startup technology be integrated into the existing pieces of puzzle? So what we're doing with this is to basically give our clients a benchmark on how they are doing today in order of these categories. And that's a quite good one to use as, okay, which areas should we provide or improve, or which areas are we doing already better? And doing this with our clients and our both public and private, we can help them to get ready to scale through partnerships. And what this Startup Readiness Assessment comes out with is a kind of a graph or a spider web diagram where you can see, based on different categories, what is good, what has to be improved, and what could you work with. And this is used as a really good starting point when you are already want to go on and partner with startups, to work with startups and explore new possibilities. But it's also valuable for those corporates that's already doing this and see, okay, in which areas can we improve? So, yeah, this tool and framework has been of great value when we are doing the bridging between the startups and the large corporates. And I would like to introduce Gustav, who's going to talk us through a bit on how they work with partnerships, how they work close to the ecosystem to gain more innovation power and also being able to develop themselves. So thanks for me, and I hand over the stage to Gustav.
Thank you, Tobias, for those kind words. It feels kind of chaotic sometimes, so it feels good to have an expert consultant saying that we are doing a great job. Thank you. So why do Storebrand work with startups, and in what way are we doing it, and what have we achieved so far? So the reason why we are doing it is that Norway is quite a small market, Sweden as well, by the way. I have to say that since I'm Swedish. So, and digital development is really expensive, so that's a quite bad equation. So you need startups to kind of explore the adjacent and transformational field, as Corey mentioned, to help us understand the customers and what we should focus on in the future. So we have worked with a couple of cases so far, 5, 6 digital partnerships. Some of them you can see on the screen. The case I would like to talk about is Dreams, that we started a partnership with 3 years ago. And they have a kind of a classic Clayton Christensen strategy. They start with the kind of simple, the most simple product in the market, in this case saving from a bank account, just to achieve a large customer base, and then develop new services to those customers to grow in the value chain. So what we did 1 year ago was to start a new service together with them, directed to this customer base. And that's a large problem in the Norwegian society and the Swedish as well, in a global problem actually, the consumer loan market. And that's especially a big problem for young people, paying an interest fee of around 20%. They do that while they are saving at the saving interest rate of 1 to 5%, so that's quite insane. So we would like to help those young people to get rid of that debt. But we realized that perhaps we shouldn't do that ourselves, so we started a discussion with Dreams. Could we do this together, because you are really good at app development and creating this customer experience. So we launched this service 6 months ago, and we are quite proud of that, because Chris Skinner, one of the most famous thinkers within this area, says that this is kind of the next phase in startup incumbent collaboration, that you could develop new services together. So we launched that service, and it's going really well, solving great customer problems. So we are trying to help Dreams to take this product to other markets, and in that way helping them to scale. And that's important for us as well, because we have invested in Dreams, so that's an incentive for us to do it. So that was why, how, and a case for us working with startups. In the end, I would like to mention 10 recommendations for you out there that haven't yet started working with startups. The first is to really acknowledge partnership as an important tool in the innovation toolbox. That's number one. Number two, you have to develop a partner strategy to show why, how, and which kind of focus areas you would like to have. Number three, start with one partner. Don't kind of invite 10 partnerships at once. Start with one, learn from that, and spread the knowledge. Number four, define the objective of the partnership, because it can be different objectives. One can be to decrease your customer acquisition costs, discover new problem areas, discover new channels for your products and services. and also kind of learn from the startup way of working. Number 5 actually. Try to appoint one person that's kind of a CAM for the partnership, so that the partner can have one contact person in the organization and create ownership in our organization. Number 6, establish OKRs together with the partner so that you can have common objectives working forward. Because the startup live in a different world from the incumbent world, so they are more kind of ad hoc in their way of working. And that's not the way the incumbent work. So you have to kind of plan way ahead. Then you can be really fast. And number 7, invest in the startup, kind of to strengthen the partnership. Number 8, when you have kind of signed the agreement with the partner and launched the service, don't stop there. That's when the real hard work starts. You have to tweak the service and investigate new ways of reaching out to the customers. Number 9, co-develop new services together, built on the incumbent and the startup strength, so we can create really good services together. And last but not least, try to create new kind of business models together, so that you create common incentives both for the startups and the incumbent, so you don't kind of get stuck in the old way of thinking, paying out commissions and provisions to the startup. So that's it. I hope you can get some good thoughts out of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Gustav. If done right, at the right time, for the right scale up, the right corporate, a partnership can accelerate your growth immensely and be the main contributor to your growth. But done badly, it can be what strangles and kills your company. The guests on our panel today all have personal experiences and insights into what makes this work and what does not. So I am happy to welcome on stage Hans Christian Aas, CEO at Imove, powered by New. Inger Ek Tronrud from Semine AI. Kåre Helle, Venture Director at DNV GL Venture. Gustav Garetti, Chief Innovation Officer at Storebrand. Johanna Herbst, Head of Growth and Impact at Danske Bank. Og Tobias Studer Andersson, Head of Sopra Steria Scale. Welcome. We say it's time to scale, and some of you even have scale as part of your title. Why is this so important, Tobias?
Why is this so important to scale?
To scale?
Yeah. Well, I do believe that scaling is not only for startups, it's also for the large corporates. And I think in the coming 5 or 10 years, what we know today is not what's going to be the next business model or way of deliver solutions. So in order to scale both for large ones and the startups, it's important to start thinking about how could we collaborate to actually scale together.
Okay, so in the collaboration, so Johanna, why are these partnerships so important? Why are they so important to you or Danske Bank?
I think for many corporates, and not only large ones, but actually of all sizes, it's important to focus on what you're best at, your strengths. So, banks have developed digital solutions and done a lot of things for many, many years, but maybe we have done a little bit of everything. So I think what we have learned now is that if we can open up for more partnerships, we actually might meet some small companies out there who are experts in the area that we want to develop. And that opens up for us to actually focus on our core strengths, which I would say are advisory and distribution. And with our advisors and connecting digital solutions with advisory, we make the solutions even stronger. And of course, we have big customer bases in different segments. So, and we also now have really good digital platforms to distribute to those segments. So to invite partners in to develop on our platforms, we can help them scale and distribute their solutions, and we can focus on advisory, and of course also keep developing digital solutions, but not in all areas.
Stick to your day job is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Kåre, in your talk, you went through some of these things as well, and how, you know, not trying to do everything yourself, but actually picking up startups and running together. But, and Tobias says it's important for the big corporations to scale as well. So can these partnerships actually help the big corporations like yourself scale?
Yeah, I generally believe that this is the way that we have to work. I think it's a challenge to that for the corporates. That means that we have to let go of some of the control. That means that we can't control everything. But what we get in return is this huge statistic volume of great ideas that could potentially scale. And then when we find that, then, as I said, we have superpowers that with all respect to all of the startups, they don't have. So we have those, and let's try and exploit that to create new value for both parties. And then our challenge is to try and release control a bit and let the things happen that we don't necessarily always can strategize around. But I think what we get in return is it's much more valuable, and it will potentially be the next leg of the big incumbent. So that's, yeah.
Superpowers out of control. I like that. I think it sounds like a great point. Inger, you're the Partner Development Manager at Semine. What does that actually mean?
Well, first of all, I would like to say nice jacket, Tobias.
Likewise.
Well, Semine was founded in Kristiansand in 2015, and we have had some great success with our customer-centric approach since the beginning, and we have had great success with direct sales. But we have always known that we need to scale with partners as well in order to reach our goals. Our ambition is not to become a large enterprise, international enterprise, but we want to scale through partners. And for that to become reality, then we need to really invest in the partner development ourselves. So we're not only one, but two PDMs in Semine at the moment, and we're approximately 70 people working there in total. So a PDM is a role that's supposed to develop partnerships with different types of partners. There are partners that comes in many sizes and shapes. But we need to understand what is our common ground, how can we find our common goals, and then our job is to work together in order to reach those goals.
Gustav, you've mentioned Dreams as one of the good partnerships that you have, but like, what kind of companies do you prefer to partner up with? Is it companies who have a clear partnership strategy, like Semine, and preferably a partnership development manager as well?
That's a good question, because I think startup, as I mentioned in the podcast the other day together with you, that startups might needs some more bureaucracy in their organizations, some more planning, some more kind of responsibility divided into different persons and people. So that's a very good initiative.
That's not your sales pitch, I hope, into the startups. We will give you more bureaucracy.
Have to differ from the rest.
Yeah. Hans Christian, how do you approach, I mean, you've been through this a few times. How do you approach entering into a partnership? Who do you get in touch with?
I think you need to know what you're looking for before you decide who you're going to speak to. So Imove is a car subscription provider, and we don't make cars, we don't do car financing, we don't do car insurance, we don't do change tires, we don't do a lot, so we're very dependent on partners. So the way that we do it is that we design a customer journey. So for example, we decided quite early that our insurance should be a sort of free mileage, risk-free returns, everyone can drive the car whenever they want, no terms at all. And then you know what to go in your luggage, right, to the insurance companies, and you're quite specific on what you're looking for. So and the way that we've approached like an insurance company is of course through network. You know some people, but usually you have to start up with the yes people, the chief digital officers or the business development, right? And at some point you have to be quite clear that you need to talk to the people that actually need to be involved in the decision. So if you're looking for car financing, then you need to talk to the credit people at some point, right? So I think it's quite important to be very frank on your expectations and try to get into business as soon as possible.
Ingrid, is that part of your strategy to go number one, yes person, number two, the no person, and just get them on board?
Well, I guess, yes. We, of course, we need to find our ambassadors in order to get from step one to step two. But we also need to be challenged along the way in order to make sure that we understand where we're going with this. So I guess yes.
I mean, there are a lot of myths surrounding corporate partnerships. You know, the corporates are the big bad wolves and the startups are the little innocent Red Riding Hoods. Are things always so black and white, Johanna?
No, I wouldn't say so. I think what's been maybe a part of the problem for large corporations is a little bit of what Tobias is bringing up here, the readiness that we have not been ready. So without maybe having the intention, things have taken too much time. You know, we have not realized the importance, as you're saying, to actually, there are many, innovators and we really want to do things and we are so positive and we really put a lot of time and effort into making it real, but too early enough and with enough, how should I put it, strength, make sure that the real decision makers, so to speak, are on board. Because that's only then you actually realize and make a partnership, a long-term partnership work. So I don't think there are some, but I don't think there are many bad wolves, big bad wolves out there, but definitely a lot of learning that needs to happen.
I can comment on that
yes,
as well, because we did a project together with Finn, owned by Schibsted, and then we did a retrospective, and some of the questions that we touched upon was, what do you, as Schibsted, what do you think Imove thinks of Schibsted? And the other way, what did we actually think about them? And it was quite interesting. We put up all the post-it notes, and they thought that they were hiding their agenda, that they were not telling the whole truth, and that we didn't trust them, right? They're very slow. But then they could look at our answers. It was much more positive than they thought themselves, right? Because we got a lot out of the partnership that they didn't quite see. So that was just an interesting exercise to do, because then you actually get it written.
So it's the corporates creating these myths about them being the big bad wolves. But trust is an interesting part of this. It's been discussed, things like NDAs. Tobias, if a startup comes to you with an idea and they say, we will tell you all about it if you sign this NDA, what is your reply?
Yeah, I mean, NDA is a question that is spoken a lot about these days. But from my perspective, from Sopra Steria Scale perspective, as I said, our job is to connect our clients' problems with possible solutions. That means in our discussions with the startup, we discuss client problems. Maybe not specific, but in bigger terms or industry problems. That means that we, in a kind of a meetings, are discussing clients and the startup discussing their solutions, which basically means that we sign a mutual NDA, which means that the cases, the possibilities that we are discussing is staying in these behind these doors. And I think it's also one way that we do it is because we are not looking to develop new products, but we are looking for our startups with solutions or these pieces of puzzle that could add value. So we're not going deep dive in the technology. It's more about, okay, what kind of use cases or what kind of problems are you solving?
Yeah. Kåre, how about you?
Yeah, I tend not to sign NDAs. So in my corporate life, I've signed maybe 200 NDAs in my life because DNV GL works with a lot of confidential information as a company. So that's not a problem when I have a client relationship. I think we should wait with the NDA until we have actually figured out that we should collaborate together. So every startup that I meet, don't tell me any secrets. Don't tell me anything that you couldn't put in the newspaper. I don't want to have it. And I didn't pick this example that I showed earlier by chance, because I have that service existing on my marketplace. We have a marketplace called veracity.com. Small advertisement there, but where this service has been offered to our clients for 3 years. For 3 years. But we haven't nailed it. We haven't done it, and I think so. So I think. And I would like to talk to this Swedish startup as well, because I think they have different value. So until we really figure out that we should work together, let's keep it at the non-confidential level and build trust. And I think your example, Hans Christian, is valuable. It's good to hear, because but your story doesn't reach the newspapers, so the rest of us doesn't hear about it. We hear about those things where it goes wrong. And I think us as big corporations, we have to be sensitive to some of the powers that we have. And the fact that we are big, and we are seen upon as big, but we are seen as also then very attractive because we are big. So we have to be sensitive to the kind of the disproportionate power in that relationship. So we shouldn't act and exploit in an exploitive manner, but it's also a little bit the startup's responsibility not to be naive. So after we launched our venture activity, I've said no to 250 companies. Naturally, they are disappointed. And I try to, at least to most of them, give them some sort of rational advice why we can't work with them, why it's not relevant. But I can't take responsibility for how they feel in the end. So they might feel aggression towards me or my company in a way that that they think that I treated them unfairly, I exploited my position. This is my risk that I have to try and balance. But I'm trying to be a little bit also today, I'm trying to be open about what I'm good and bad at. And I'm bad at something. And I'm trying to build that trustful relationship. Then I think we can work together in a sensible manner. And to be honest, we finished one big venture investment over this summer. We didn't sign any NDAs between the two organizations. We've been talking to them for a long time. Even after we signed the shareholder agreements, of course, in the shareholder agreements, there are some confidentiality clauses that we have to relate to, but there's no kind of formal NDAs existing between those two companies.
So can you actually make these valuable decisions on entering a partnership if you don't discuss the really important things that might be covered in an NDA, Johanna?
I mean, for sure, I think there are so many things you have to figure out first. So to make sure that you are compatible, because I think you can talk about enough things without signing an NDA, maybe to see that we have some things, say we want the same things. But then, of course, bringing in transparency about, as you were talking a little bit about timelines and everything surrounding that. How long time will this take? I mean, where can we help you scale, and how long will that take? What will it take from you? Because of course, even if in a corporate startup partnership, the corporates bring the kind of maybe more resources into it, but of course it will take a focus and maybe also more resources from the startup. So I think with experience you learn that the transparency and looking at it very realistically and not too optimistic, I think is a good learning.
How about you, Ingrid? Is that the approach? Transparency, is that part of your partnership plan?
Well, I mean, I agree with both of you, or all of you, because having an open discussion without sharing big company secrets is of course important. But for a small startup, our IP is all we have. So for us, it's an extra insurance to ensure that this information won't be shared across. We live in a more and more open corporate environment. For example, people save their documents on OneDrives and SharePoints and stuff like that. And if you have a policy within the organization that we're supposed to share everything, then it's really easy to search across the entire organization for information. And you can't make sure that you won't have anyone within the company that won't share this further on, that are not involved with the process. So for us, it's an insurance thing.
Readiness came up, well, actually, in being naive came up as one of the things, and I guess it's quite linked as well to being ready to approach a corporate for a partnership. And Gustav, we discussed this a little bit in the podcast as well, but what do you need to be ready about? Like, how ready should you be to approach you at Storebrand for it actually to be able to go somewhere?
Yeah, we discussed that we get a lot of emails suggesting partnerships, and you can see from the first line that it's copied to 100 different companies. So you have to kind of show that you have done your research about Storebrand and have an understanding of how we are working, etc. So please do your homework before and think through how you would like to partner up and what kind of business model you are looking for. So prepare a bit more.
Would it be interesting for you if it's a company that approaches you that's a perfect fit in all ways, but they do not have global ambitions? Is that an interesting corporate partner?
Absolutely. Their global ambition isn't that important for us actually. So it's more important for us to succeed on the Norwegian and the Swedish market. And also would like to mention about this big, small difference that I always try to remember Storebrand that once it was a startup, and every company has been. It was more than 250 years ago. Storebrand was a startup, but it was once in the days. And also that we are quite small. We are smaller than Uber, much smaller than Spotify. We are 1,500 people in Norway, so we are not that big.
I guess that's a good perspective to keep. So how about if we also talk about like entering these partnerships and the risk on both sides, like how should we value the time spent? Hans Christian, there's companies who would like corporates to pay for pilots, for instance, or how do you value your time both in the pre-phase and then actual production phase in a corporate partnership?
I think at least in particular in the startup, like in the early days of a company, then you're on very short lifespan when it comes to capital, right? So you usually sort of live 3 to 6 months at a time, and that's not a good life. And of course, it means that if you're going into a very time-consuming process, it could actually kill you, right? So that's so for startups, time is cash, like they say. You don't feel the same way when you work for a corporate. So that is, of course, but it's a pressure that you have, and you know that because of that you have to run parallel dialogues. You have to think sort of plan A, B, C, D all the time. So the downside of having very time-consuming processes is that you have to explain it to the board. You have to explain it to the owners. We need more capital to do this to finish it, and they kind of remember that. So the next time you're sort of suggesting that, okay, let's do this, then it's like, you spent too much time on that the last time, right? So you have to, you have to think in parallel in alternatives all the time.
And I know this has been a subject also within public sector, that the decision time takes too long. But another issue has also been, you can enter into a bidding and you can actually win the bid, but then when the first phase is over, the startup is suddenly considered too small to carry on the project. Do you have any experience with this, Tobias?
Yeah, and I think it's it's a matureness of the corporate here. Okay, and why are they want to explore something new together with a startup? I mean, is it just to explore new technology, or is it just to try something cool things, or is it just to actually see, okay, how can this solution actually solve a problem and fit into our bigger strategy? And we've seen a lot of examples on startup corporate partnerships that is basically ending up in a pilot or a MVP, and then it won't be scaled. And then, I mean, that's time consuming both for the startup and for the big one. But maybe it's the case if something takes a little bit longer to get an answer from the corporate, maybe they're actually thinking about how could the solution fit in a bigger picture. So in one way, if time takes a little bit longer time and sign a contract the day after, maybe they have a bigger plan for you. And I think that's a good one to remember, both in public sector but also for private companies when they're actually entering a partnership.
What's a big red flag for you, Ingrid?
A big red flag for me is when there aren't any strategy behind, for example, a pilot. If you do a pilot and it ends up with a tender process, and for a tender process you need to have, for example, 3 reference stories from similar customers. And for a startup, what do you do then? So that's a big red flag for us, actually. And there are a lot of good initiatives when it comes to becoming more innovative in different companies. They have an innovation team, for example. But I think it all drills down to, is innovation a part of the backbone of the company? Are we willing to invest in new technology in order to become more innovative? So, yeah.
Johanna, you've actually said banks are boring.
Yeah.
How can banks then be a good partner for growth companies?
Yeah, we are hopefully not that boring. We actually do a lot of fun. It's fun working in a
words,
bank.
not mine.
I know. But no, I think we are doing things on many levels in the company. And I mean, one thing we are doing is definitely looking into our digital solutions so that we build platforms that we can open up for partners so that we are not maybe dependent on our developers to actually get the solution out there, but we can have our partners, developers develop on the platform. And it doesn't mean it doesn't have to be approved or, you know, everything before it hits or reaches our customers. But it means that they can develop it, we can market it, and make sure that it reaches a broad spectrum of customers or a pilot segment of customers to test it, to see if we actually want to invest more in it and make it a broader solution. So I think that is one important step and one priority that we have done to focus on that. And I do hope and I do think that that will lead to many interesting, innovative solutions for our customers in the years to come.
Another interesting thing that we have been discussing is, of course, the culture. Culture when you scale to different countries or with the different partners. And for instance, when you approach an insurance company and say, we want to partner up with you, but we want to flip your business model completely upside down. How is that a culture fit?
It's probably not a culture fit, but and you just have to deal with that. So actually, for Tryg, we got it in writing that they had to sort of not expose us for any sort of slow-moving decisioning processes or any core systems that wouldn't talk to each other, and we have that in writing that they can sort of mention it in the meetings. So you can get it in writing, but I think sort of as a startup, you also have to adopt and you have to try to understand how the corporates think. And a red flag for me is if it's not a burning platform for the corporate, then it will probably not make sense sort of moving and scaling this properly. So as an example with car financing, one of the things that happens when users get access to cars instead of buying them is that you don't get a car loan also. So the whole sort of retail market on car loans will disappear if everyone is getting access to cars. And it's one of the areas where the bank earn the most money, right? So then you have a burning platform to discuss, is that we can actually sort of move you into an area which you're really going to need in the future. And then you just have to deal with the different cultures, I think.
Do you experience a lot of culture differences even in the way you have conversations with startups, Kåre? Or scale-ups or growth companies?
Yeah, I think, again, I think a lot of the startup community, a little bit to Gustav's point also, they don't know what we do that well, and they have then high expectations for what we can do for them, and we can't really sometimes. And I think finding this, where these two things match well, it's not easy. It's very difficult to find where there is an internal community or engagement who wants to change, who wants to disrupt the core or do that part, and where that matches the external kind of wish for partner with us. So I think that's a challenge that I'm trying to bridge on trying to figure out. I think there's also a cultural difference and like Hans Christian is mentioning, the startups has not infinite time. Incumbents have. doesn't really matter for us if we take this meeting, Hans Christian, in January or next week. For me, that's the timeline. We have that time in corporates. So I think that's also a culture. I think this is also a way that, again, the big corporates should be conscious about how they engage in this community. 3 months is a very long time for a startup. Then give them a big fat no very fast, saying, I don't think we can move and shake this before Christmas. Spend your time elsewhere. And then recognize them, and then may go to the competitive business and get some traction there. And that's, I wish that we had. But let's just realize that we are slow. And it's not, I think it's not, we're not slow because there's lots of things happening inside the corporate to prepare for that meeting in January. It's just that we're slow. And we need to make those people meet and get them to, and then getting a CEO's time, that's extremely time consuming. I think this culture of this culture shift and the expectations, I think we should be also clearer about from our side, saying that, sorry, I don't think we're the right partner. I wish that we were. I wish that we can move you into the States and scale you into those 40% market share that we have. But the guys in the States are not ready for you now. They are not willing to do that. They are not looking for new value offering from their customers. They are just trying to do whatever they do. There's no point of me then introducing Space BT to them and wasting Space BT's time. So I think that's also something that big corporates should be conscious about. And also again, the startup should not be too high, have too high expectations. Don't waste time on me when I'm not responding fast. Then move on to the next one and try and go to Lloyd's Register or our biggest competitor, or the bastards as we call them. Go to them instead and find your value there. If they are faster than us, then that's our problem.
Yeah, so no's come best hard and fast, and go to the bastards. Are you slow, Jana?
Compared to the startups, we are.
Yes.
Maybe sometimes for good reasons, and sometimes because of bureaucracy and things we really are working hard on getting better at. But because of that, I think it's so important that we are selective, as you are alluding to a bit as well, that we choose very carefully who we want to collaborate with, so that we don't waste people's time. And that we do it in the areas where we really want and need to develop, picking up on what you said, that it's not easy to move yourself out of your comfort zone or where you make the most money, even if you maybe know that that's where you need to go. So making sure that you partner up with people who can really move you in your strategic direction. So picking those one and, say politely no to others.
So who wants to add a final statement? Because we all agree that we want these partnerships, right? So what's the great part of these partnerships? Why do we want them? Go.
Go. I do believe it's 3 things. One is to be clear what problems you can solve and try to wrap it so that the corporate understand what's the value of it. 2, we're talking about like time and how long things take, but it's all about timing, because it's maybe not, you could have the best solutions, but maybe the timing is not right now. And the 3rd one is to don't give up, be a hustler. And I think experiment and see what kind of clients are good for you, and also for the corporates, be a hustler there as well. Think about how could you reinvent yourselves with partnerships with new and innovative technology companies.
Gustav?
Yes, a thought that you have to kind of differ your thoughts about speed, that you kind of classify it into 2 categories. That one is kind of the planning phase, that can be a bit longer in an incumbent, but when you actually start with the project, then the incumbent is at least as fast as the startup actually. So it's 2 kinds of speed. And my advice, except from the 10 I mentioned, is that try to have a bit fun, because it's a really good environment out there, a bit different from the incumbent environment. The first time I introduced Storebrand to Dreams, for example, I had my son with me. I tried to explain Storebrand to them at the same time my son, who was around 4 years, putting post-its in all over my face, and everyone just laughing at me. So we kind of try to keep it a bit relaxed.
That sounds like a great advice. Any more comments before we
I
end?
think it's good that we're touching upon the good things as well for the partnerships. It sounds pretty terrible by now. But I think also there's something that you can sort of go even further, that you can by combining two parties that you can create some magic that was not there in the first place. So, for example, for us, one of the things we tried to do was to look at all the traditional costs of having cars and then try to turn some of them into revenues, because we think that's a good disruption exercise. And then we decided, okay, we should deliver cars at home and we should make money on it. We should give the customers weekend cars if they need it, and we should make money on it. We should let the customers pause their subscription during vacation and make money on it. That was sort of, and then we just, okay, let's figure out how we do that. And then all of them sort of resulted in that we actually did it. We found partners that there was a win-win collaboration. So now we have a company that takes our car home to the customers. They sell their existing car that the customer have, fix everything, and then we get a commission every time they sell it. So no logistics, no costs, just revenues. The weekend car, we picked them up from used car pools, just cars sort of sitting there. The orange Volvo that no one wants to buy. It's the perfect weekend car. And also when we paused the subscription, we said, okay, are you going on vacation? Maybe save the money. You don't have to pay for your car when it's sitting at home. And then we rented it out to the rental companies because they have peak season and looking for cars. And of course, they paid much more than the customer paid for that month. So I think sort of you should sort of really look into it. And I think there's magic everywhere if you really dig for it.
Thank you. Thank you all. I think that's quite well summed up. So if you're ready, both corporates or startups, scale-ups, growth companies, know what your strategy is entering into the partnership, bring your kids to work, stick to what you're good at, and then turn cost into profit. So I think we can agree that scaling through corporate partnerships is the way to go.